Good. So what I'll do is that I know there are some questions, from the floor, but allow me just to warm up our panelists by perhaps asking some questions, and then pick their brains, their views in some of those topics. Okay, for a start, perhaps can I ask, in your view, to all my panelists here, in your view, can you share why and how data is increasingly becoming important in today's economy? And since I have Pierre online waiting for quite some time, maybe can we have Pierre to share with us, from your perspective, coming from Australia, can you share why and how data is increasingly becoming more important, specifically in Australia's economy?
So in Australia, I've got a bit of feedback. That's okay. In Australia, we have identified at the highest level, in fact, our Prime Minister has made several public statements to this effect, that data is a critical part of a data-driven economy in the 21st century. It's a critical part of a 21st century government, and basically it is only going to get more and more important, obviously. I think that the shift is not that it's going to get more important. I think everyone understands that. I think the shift is in how we see and how we use data in more useful ways, how we see data as valuable in of itself, not just as a byproduct of a process. So I think it's only going to get more important in the economy. I think that it, not just for people to build upon, whether they're applications or businesses or analysis or visualizations, but data to help inform better decision making on an ongoing basis, as I was talking about just earlier. So I don't think there's any question that data is going to get more and more important. The question is, how broad can we make that implementation? Because if data is only ever the domain of data specialists, then we won't realise the fuller benefits of the entire economy.
All right. How about Rebecca and Hao Jie? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree completely with what Pia said. I think data, we all understand in this room that it's important. That's why we're here. But from a journalistic perspective, we have to be respectful of this opening up of data as well to kind of encourage transparency. Yeah, I think, more and more data sets are being opened up, but at the same time, some data sets they're being closed off because of the way that they've been handled by the media or other organizations. So we do have to be a bit careful and just keep encouraging companies and governments to open up that data for us.
Okay, I think if you look at the trend of data use, starting from the start of data being collected, it was first in a written format, and then it became in a spreadsheet in Excel. And then it became apps that we see today, but most of these apps are using single data sets. And then increasingly we see applications, mobile apps, computer apps that use or draw on multiple data sets to create what we call mashups. So with this trend, it's obvious that the use of data and the need for data is becoming more and more important. And from a public sector point of view, you know that right now the government is pushing for this Smart Nation initiative in order to provide services faster and become a more anticipatory government. There is obviously the need for all this data and data to be served faster and faster. So I absolutely agree that it's becoming more and more important.
All right, thank you. But, what does it really take to be a data journalist, and what sort of skills and knowledge is required to be a data journalist? And perhaps you can also share with us, in today's era where information is at your fingertips, some of the information you presented seems like quite easily obtained, from the internet. So how do you, use those given those data to generate more compelling stories, for the public in your role?
Skills for a data journalist. I think first and foremost, you need to be passionate about what's possible with data. And you have to be a journalist at heart. You have to be able to want to tell that story however you can. And data is just one of the mediums for doing that. of course, you know, it's not just about getting the data set, it's also about cleaning it. We also have to design it, visualize it, even then we start to code it and build it into these applications that make it easy for people to understand what the data is saying. Then I don't know that the data is so readily available to us just yet. I think the format of having APIs and having it openly available to download on the internet is definitely a lot easier than it has been in the past for journalists. However, I still think that we've got a really long way to go. A lot of the stuff that I've actually built is via scraping from the web. So it's stuff that's available online, but they don't give it to you in a format where you can download it or where you can connect it to a real-time data set. So a lot of it we have to build ourselves. I mean, the beta.data.gov.sg does a really amazing job right now. They're working on an amazing repository of data where you can actually embed interactive charts. They're going to build the APIs and everything, but I think we're still a long way ahead of actually having access to raw data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So now, Pierre, back to you. Perhaps I'd like to ask you, is open data adoption prevalent in Australia? And what are some of the programs that Australia government has put in place to encourage adoption of open data? Earlier, Hao Jie has shared with us that they are piloting a project, a platform to use private data. So, what are some of the programs? Perhaps you can share with us in your efforts where Australia government has adopted relating to opening data to the public.
Sure. So Australia's been dabbling in this space for about 5 years now. And the very first, Australia has had a lot of open information in the past in terms of documents and publications and reports, but we really only started doing open data we started doing open data across government really only 5 years ago. Prior to that, there are a couple of departments who have always done a certain amount of open data, so the Bureau of Statistics are a notable example. But as a whole of government initiative, we started 5 years ago. The first version of data.gov.au was very basic, and I mean, it was a huge effort on the part of the person largely running it, which was a wonderful lady called Lisa, who did a really good job. But the technology wasn't really there yet, and the appetite and the maturity of government agencies was still quite low, apart from a few specialist agencies. So the first version launched a bunch of data very quickly, and then that data became out of date very quickly, and then it basically just sat very inactive for about a year. So I came and took over data.gov.au 3 years ago, 3 years ago, and we immediately looked at what was working and not working in Australia and around the world. So we actually based our efforts on, after looking around a lot of different countries, we based our efforts on the UK because at that stage, the way that they operated was they had a really good platform, and we really liked their platform. The platform was CCAN, but they also had a very lean team of only sort of 3 people that ran the platform, and they ran it, and in a technical sense they ran it. They also had a policy group that was separate, but the technical team were able to do a lot with just 3 people and with a fairly small budget, because the distribution, the data publishing process was distributed, massively distributed. There were 270 publishers across the whole of UK government at that point in time. We wanted to take the same distributed publishing approach in Australia. We knew that just having a catalogue that links to things doesn't really work. It's not sustainable, because a lot of things break and agencies don't have the right motivation to keep it up to date. So we spent a lot of time looking at what is the motivation for an agency to publish. Because saying that we want to do open data to drive a data-driven economy sounds great, but it doesn't hit the bottom line. It doesn't create that serious motivation for an agency to want to publish data, because they have to do their own business. They have to run their own organisation. They have to run their own programs. So we looked at what's in it for government. Why would an agency want to publish more open data? And we found quite happily that a lot of the benefits to agencies were around efficiency benefits, were around cheaper service delivery because they could publish their data in a way that underpinned their services through an API, and then their service development became a lot cheaper because it was API based. We also found a lot of agencies were able to take advantage of public innovation. So someone in the public sector in the private sector might develop an application better than the government could, and then the government can build on the top of that innovation rather than trying to do everything themselves. So once we established that there was significant benefits to government, to actual departments in publishing data, we started to work with them very closely. So our platform is a combination of CCAN plus a Geo server, which is a spatial publishing tool, on Amazon with a data model, registry, and a few other components. And we've done a lot of development, and all of our code is publicly available on GitHub for anyone that wants to use it. And what we found is that by offering agencies not just the ability to link to their data, but the ability to host data in a high-quality, machine-readable, API-enabled way on our platform, that lowered the barrier of to entry for a lot of those agencies, because only a few agencies are very well equipped to publish data in a quality way. So suddenly the rest of the public service was better able to publish data. The other thing is we put the control in their hands. So our platform is very strong, but our strategy was largely based around encouraging, supporting, and training those agencies to want to publish data in the first place. And now that we've gone from 500 to 7,500 data sets, we're now on the path to getting to a high quality framework. So we've been on a bit of a journey, but we had to teach people. We literally had people assume that their book was open data, and we had to teach them what data meant. Nowadays, most of those agencies are actually putting in place strong open data programs in order to do this stuff because they want to do it. So we changed the entire approach. So infrastructure, strategy, skills, those are, I guess, the key big things for our approach.
All right. Thank you, Pierre. Looks like you have done hell a lot of stuff, you know, in this space here. And I think Singapore, because earlier Hao Jie was sharing with us some of the efforts that we are trying to harness the power of data here. Now, perhaps I can turn the mic to Hao Jie. Now, first, I want to congratulate you on embarking a very interesting project, and I think that is going to be very useful for the industry. Especially to the private sector. Now, but the question here is that, you know, how do you ensure that the data is legitimate? Because you can do, well, these are not government data sets, right? But how do you ensure from a user's perspective that the data that they either acquire, use, or pay are legitimate? And then any plans to give assurance to the users in using these data sets in a more safer way?
Okay, so this mechanism or this platform that we have built and launched, you can imagine it as a search engine or a pointer to all these different various data providers in the private sector. So in essence, we do not actually, as IDA or the government of Singapore, do not actually own any of these data sets that you can look for and learn about on the DAS platform. So it's really about helping users with dataset discovery, and as to whether these datasets are legit or not, a lot of these companies, they are already in the business of selling data. Those companies, they are participating in our pilot. So obviously, they will need to comply with Singapore laws. So some of you might be quite familiar with the PDPA, Private Data Act. So obviously, they cannot release things like private person data, PII, and they must make sure that any data they released or they sell have gotten prior approval from the other parties which they might have collected this data from. So these are simple principles that they would have to live by. As to how in the future we might want to, because right now it's just about pointing to these data providers and their data sets. We have plans to help users with assurance of these data sets in the future. So one initiative that we are looking at is in the aspect of data certification. So if you are familiar with the work of Open Data Institute in the UK, they have done some work in that, and they allow you to fill up some kind of questionnaire and to certify your data sets. So at IDA, we are embarking on work in that aspect as well. And last Friday, we actually just thrown a tender to get a consultant to work with us to come up with a set of guidelines. Eventually, hopefully, it will become a standard. That it's not going to be brand new to Singapore. It's going to be have some synergy with what we can find overseas. But once we have that out, we hopefully can also get these data providers who are participating in our pilots to use them. What this data certification will cover will be things such as terms of use of the datasets, the quality or the use of APIs, the governance of the dataset, the source of where it comes from, and the credibility of this source, or even including the frequency of update. So these are some areas that we hope to be able to cover in the data certification initiative.
Okay, thank you, Hao Jie. Now, my timekeeper tells me that I have less than a minute left, but I thought, maybe I should turn the time to the floor. Is there any questions for any of our panelists here?
It was just in relation to data literacy, infrastructure and leadership, how countries like Singapore and Australia can work together in a much more global context.
His question was relating to how Singapore and Australia can collaborate together.
Well, we'd love to. So I mean, basically, let's first of all let's chat. We like to talk with anyone that will talk to us. We talk regularly, or as regularly as we can, with as many other jurisdictions as we can. In fact, some of your other speakers there from some other countries we have spoken to a few times. So it'd be lovely to have a government-to-government discussion about what you guys are doing, what we're doing, what lessons learnt there are. You are very welcome to use as much of our code or content or anything that you like, that you think is useful. And if there's certain things we find problems that we have in common, it'd be lovely to figure out how to collaborate on those, particularly if we're playing with common platforms and such. I've always had a bit of a dream of having a regular government sort of hackfest on identifying and solving common problems that we have across different jurisdictions. So it'd be lovely to start that conversation. So yeah, we'd love to chat to you guys and figure out how we can work together.
Good. Hao Jie, do you have a comment on that one as well from Singapore side?
I think in terms of collaboration, what we can do is, because I've talked about these technical references in data quality metrics, in data versioning, and the work that we are going to do in data certification. And I also talked about us trying to not reinvent the wheel. So whatever that we can learn from Australia, and I guess vice versa, we can go the route of sharing these TRs and standards that we are creating, and maybe talking to them about the relevant work they are doing. And I think Pierre mentioned that they are also using CCAN quite widely. So in terms of the experience in using or leveraging on such a platform, is something that we can work on. And if you are not aware, we actually had ran a Data 101 talk series. My big boss mentioned that yesterday in his keynote speech. So we have actually started collaboration with that, because Stephen, who asked the question, was actually one of the speakers at our Data 101 series, which is held twice a month, covering business topics and technical topics. And Stephen was very nice to come down from Australia and to talk to our audience about the use of CCAN. So thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. I know the time is up, but I have one audience who has a burning question from his face. So perhaps, just one last question for you.
Hi, Pia. This is Harish. The question I have would be, when the data that you put out from data.gov.au, would it be useful for it to be on a Creative Commons type of license as well? Or has that even been considered for the data that is put out under data.gov.au?
So the Australian government policy on data is quite clear. So all government data and information, so publications and reports and freedom of information and all that kind of stuff, all government data information should be released Creative Commons by attribution as the default license, unless there is a very specific reason to choose otherwise. That has made it very easy, because when we're talking to departments about publishing data, they don't get caught up. Well, the moment you get a lawyer involved in the conversation, it takes 10 times as long. So it's been very good to have a clear default, which enables active reuse of data and enables economic development and enables research and enables all the kinds of good, innovative uses of data that we want to see in a very clear, easy to understand license. I think that if we had gone, so the UK chose to have, they made up their own license, they called it the Open Government License or something like that. We decided that that was too complicated. Like, we may as well choose a clear license that everyone agreed was a good license and go with that. So from our perspective, the licensing has been very good in helping encourage that reuse of data.
All right. Thank you, Pierre. All right. I think my time is up, and thank you very much. You've been a great audience. Thank you to our panelists as well. Thank you to Pierre. Thank you. Bye.